Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the SATSA webinar. We're sitting in Cape Town and the cannon has just gone off, so we know it is 12 o'clock, certainly in this part of the world. I want to thank all of you for logging on this afternoon to talk about something that's quite important, especially at this time, but in general. But before I kick off with how we're going to run the webinar and what I have to say, I just wanted to hand over to David Frost, SATSA CEO, for a little welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. As Natalia said, thank you for joining us. This is probably our first SATSA webinar, and hopefully we are going to do many more on topics that hopefully have got to do with growth. But today's topic really is a very serious one, and it really is the reaction and the coming together about what we can do about the spate of crimes on tourists and the reporting that has taken place on the back of this internationally. As SATSA, we take this incredibly seriously. We saw a significant decline in our numbers on the back of the water crisis, and if this particular crisis isn't managed as well as we can, the danger is we will also see a decline in numbers when we can sorely afford that. So what have we done from a SATSA point of view is we have quite relatively meager resources within the organization. But what we have done is we've deployed the resources we have. We're very fortunate to have Natalia Rosa as our PR and communications manager, and she's done a sterling job in working together with myself and senior members of SATSA to put together a crisis communication strategy and also looking at reputational management thereof. I must say we haven't had any assistance in this in terms of any financial contribution outside SATSA, and the dialogue and conversation with our public sector partners, and I put that in parenthesis, has been sorely lacking, as has the constructive, and I think I would like to say informed messaging. We haven't seen any constructive and informed messaging going out. We've seen the odd press statements, and much of that has, to our mind, not done any good at all. So what can we do? And the mantra at the moment in the current state we find ourselves in South Africa is control what we can control. And as an industry, we do wield some power. So as SATSA, we have occupied the space, and we'll be sharing with you what we've done in that respect. Natalia has managed this process. We have some very rich data that came out of the survey we sent out, and there was a significant response to that, which Natalia will take you through. We've also been able to generate what we hope is useful information that you can then send out to your trade partners overseas around some frequently asked questions. And we're hoping, as we go on in this process, to be able to refine those, to be able to make them source market specific as we respond to this. But without further ado, let me hand over to Natalia, who is going to take us through and explain the coordinated response from a SATSA perspective.
Thank you, David. I would like to just run you through how the webinar works. I'm going to go through a presentation. At any time while I am running through the presentation, if you would like to ask a question, at the bottom of your screen, you will see there is a Q&A folder. Click on the Q&A folder, type in your question, and that will come through to me. As I've said, you can pose your question throughout the webinar. It won't interrupt the webinar presentation. We will then endeavor to answer those questions at a later stage. If you are experiencing any technical issues, or if you feel that the sound is disrupted, try and log off from the webinar software and rejoin. If we are experiencing technical issues, we will try and resolve them on your behalf. So let me go straight into the presentation now. As David was speaking earlier, we've put together quite a robust crisis communication and reputation management strategy. But before I unpack what that looks like and how you can get involved, I want to just go back to basics and explain what a crisis is. So a crisis is a perceived or real event that disrupts normal tourism activities. So at the moment, we think of the safety and security issue as some people would say it's perceived, other people would say it's a real issue. But at the end of the day, it is impacting negatively on the region's desirability as a tourism destination. What could a crisis be? We experienced it last year and the year before, the drought in the Western Cape, which had a significant impact on our inbound arrivals. It could be a terrorist incident. It could be a major transport accident. It could be the outbreak of a disease, as we have also experienced with listeriosis and are now seeing with Ebola looming on our borders. It could even be something like a high-profile criticism. So if a celebrity came to South Africa and decided that they had not had the perfect experience, they are influential enough to cause a crisis. So why is it important to have a plan? And we are now actually acting after the fact with a plan. We should have had a plan in place when something happens to press the green button so that everybody was on side and we could roll it out. But we know that the potential economic impact can be devastating and long-lasting, that the region's reputation is on the line. And once that reputation is on the line, it's very difficult for us to reverse it. But every disaster or crisis attracts unwelcome attention. And by that, we've seen over the last 2 weeks, just monitoring the media, how when one article gets picked up, other journalists are then made aware of the fact that there is an issue, and they almost look for coverage that they can generate around the same issue. So it's a bit like a line of dominoes falling. When one or two publications or media come out with a story, you will see that media in general will look for other examples of that story, and then it will just get out of control. We also know that perceptions do not always reflect the reality on the ground. And I know that there is a great deal of debate currently on whether or not we can say that the coverage we're receiving is as a result of perception or reality. I will tell you in a little while that actually it is not a perception issue. It is a reality issue. But the narrative that is being shared across media and social media currently is one where tourists are being targeted, and that perception is incorrect. Tourists have been caught in the crossfire of something that is of particular importance and needs to be sorted out from a South African perspective. So what happens when there is no plan or no action, like we have seen over the last couple of weeks? You get mixed messages from multiple experts. And those of you who saw an article which was picked up quite prolifically in the South African press, citing one tourist guide's opinion on cancellations to South Africa as a result of crime and safety, will understand what the damage of that is. The tourist guide was not a spokesperson for the country. The tourist guide was also not a well-informed person, but that tourist guide was willing to give comment to media, and in the gap, media latched onto that one tourist guide's comment and created a whole series of articles about how South Africa is experiencing extreme inbound tourism arrival cancellations. That does incredible harm. So before you feel the need to comment to media, just think about the fact that if we all have mixed messages that are going to media, we will have an issue. The information released is too late. So they are looking for comment, they are looking for information that they can include in their media. And in the absence of that information, they will pick up on commentary or facts that perhaps are not as accurate as they should be or do not have the context that is required. So we then have all this rumor and we have all this myth going out and we have all this real-time social media and this absolute panic because in the gap, people are seeking to fill the gap with information, and that information is not always accurate. We also then have power struggles and confusion in the space of there not being a plan or action. As I said, we are now trying to put a plan in place. This plan is almost like if you can imagine the little Dutch guy in the dike putting his finger and trying to stop the water from flowing into the canal. We're doing that at the moment, but we should have had a plan for this already. And we have to have a plan in case something like this happens again, whether it is a listeriosis outbreak, whether it is Ebola, whether it is a drought, we need to have an action plan. In the past 10 days, we have tracked 120 stories tagged South Africa, tourism, and crime. 120 stories. Not all of them are international stories. In fact, South Africans are our own worst enemies. Most of the coverage has originated from South Africa, not internationally. But we have had a good number of very high-profile media, like the Financial Times, like the Times in the UK, like Fox News, spread information about South Africa and the crime situation, plus the impact that that has on tourism. In the survey that we ran recently, and to those of you who contributed, thank you very, very much for filling it out. I know it was a long survey, but we needed to do it to get a sense of where we actually were on the ground. If this was a perception issue or if it was reality. A very high percentage of industry stakeholders polled in that survey revealed that their groups and visitors to South Africa had been victims of crime. A very, very high percentage. I'm not going to share that percentage because we do not want that percentage to be revealed across the world, but it is definitely not a perception issue anymore. It is a reality. So it's not going away. We can deflect that it's a crisis, but we have to change the narrative away from tourists are being targeted to we have a problem with crime in South Africa in which tourists from time to time get caught. That is how the narrative has to change. We cannot say blanket that tourists will be safe when they come to South Africa. We cannot guarantee their safety when they come to South Africa. We can only inform them proactively that South Africa has an issue with crime and that they need to do the following to keep themselves safe, and from time to time, they may get caught in it. So we have to be proactive, not reactive. Before the crisis, we have to prepare for the worst case scenario. What is the worst possible thing that could happen? When the actual crisis happens, we have to respond immediately. We can't wait for a week to issue a press release that goes out and then it's full of spelling mistakes and it's just written appallingly bad. We have to be ready with holding statements and press releases to go as soon as something happens. And then after the crisis has happened, we have to restore visitor confidence. So for every negative story that gets published, we have 10 positive stories that balance that. And that is the ratio. Every one negative story needs 10 positive stories to balance the ratio. Who's responsible? We all are responsible. It's not just SATSA. It's not public sector specifically. We all have to get on the same bandwagon and sing from the same hymn sheet. And I'm very pleased to say that Westgrow, based on the fact that they have experience with the crisis communication side of things from the drought that we've experienced over the last 2 years in the Western Cape, have been able to plug and play their previous strategy. And we are working very, very closely with them at the moment to push out some positive Western Cape messaging, which you will all be beneficiaries of. So just a huge thank you from my side, and I'm sure from David, to Westgrow, to Tim and to Judy for stepping into the gap and helping us communicate what's happening in the Western Cape specifically. But you can all be foot soldiers. You can all help us with this task, and I'm going to explain to you in a little while how. The first thing, of course, is for us to speak with one voice. So remember, I was talking about the tourist guide who piped up and told everybody through media that we've had all these cancellations to Cape Town. We should not have had that situation. Everyone should be speaking with the same voice, and everyone should be saying the same message, that we have a crime problem in South Africa. We recognize it. We want to keep our tourists safe. Tourists are getting caught in the crossfire. This is how us as an industry are working to make sure that you can be as safe as possible. The aims of this crisis communication reputation management strategy that we have is to enhance a positive perception of South Africa, to deal with the harmful perceptions of South Africa proactively, to align all stakeholders to speak with one voice, and to empower you, our members, with clear messaging, so that when you get an email from your Dutch tour operator, or one of your consumer customers phones you and says, I'm worried about coming to South Africa, you have something concrete that you can go back to them with and say, I hear you, I understand your concern, you're completely right to feel concerned, this is what we believe, this is how we feel you could be kept safe. So the first thing we had to do was get to grips with who we were communicating with. That is the first starting point, who we're communicating with and where do we find these people? Because there is no use us communicating in media, for example, if the people we're trying to communicate with are not monitoring media. Same with social media. We can't be everywhere. So we had to be very targeted with who we were communicating with and how we were going to communicate with them. So how do we communicate with them? Through media releases, through doing interviews and press conferences, proactively with those journalists who are writing about South Africa at the moment. So to that point, we have developed a database of journalists, both locally and internationally, who are writing about South Africa so that we can proactively communicate with them through media releases, Q&As, press conferences about what's happening on the ground so that they don't have to look for the information. It falls into their lap. They don't have to work for it. We have one central contact point for media. Media, if they are looking for comment, can come to that central contact point. And if you receive a media inquiry around this, you can send that media inquiry to that central contact point, which I will give you at the end of the webinar, for us to respond proactively and responsibly. We'll also provide you with trade communications that you can copy, paste, edit, and send through to your travel industry customers overseas. That includes, like the Westgrow FAQ that you received last week, that includes fact sheets, that might include an advisory or an alert. You can also direct people to visitor information centers, telephone information, telephone numbers, email newsletters, which you will get on a weekly basis. We are setting up a website, one website, where you can direct people for information about traveling safely to South Africa. And we will do print articles as well. We have to be the first source for information because in the absence of a source, the journalist might find a source that is not reporting accurately. But very importantly, and this is what I found so lacking in the public sector response that we saw last week, was empathy. And that empathy needs to be shown early. You cannot say and you cannot dismiss outright that there is no problem in South Africa. Come to South Africa, you will be safe. You have to express empathy for the fact that there are people who are being affected by crime when they visit South Africa, and that you have empathy for the person because they are concerned for their safety. So expressing empathy early is very important in any crisis communication. You have to show competence. You can't say, I don't know, I'm not sure, let me get back to you. You revert immediately, you express your empathy and you say, we understand this is an issue, we are working as an industry to provide actions that will try and keep tourists safe. This is what's happening on the ground, and you are being honest and explaining the exact situation with them. If you try and sugarcoat it, cover it up, they are going to smell it a mile away. So our messaging, we're keeping the media contact lists regularly updated so that we can ensure that we are proactively communicating with them. We have developed a database of all the stakeholders who have said that they want us to communicate with them on proactive messaging. So if you would like to be added to a database that receives a weekly mailer with updated information on what is happening on the ground, what to communicate to your customers, what new information resources are available, I will give you the email address now, but you will also get it at the end. It's info@travel2southafrica.org, info@travel2southafrica.org, or you can email me on communications@satsa.co.za, communications@satsa.co.za. We will add you to that database and you will get a weekly mailer with anything that we have updated for your use. We will also give you some communications tools through SATSA. We will endeavor to find one nominated media spokesperson and train them. So whether that is the Tourism Business Council that is the spokesperson, or whether that is SATSA, that one person will be nominated as the spokesperson. Not 40 million people with their own messages, but one. We will also give you tips on dealing with the media, but again, I urge you, if you get a media inquiry and you feel that you are not able to deal with that media inquiry, rather forward it to SATSA and we will deal with it on your behalf. We will also draft media releases and background materials and FAQs, which will be housed on one website that you can go and you can pull from to communicate to your stakeholders. So, working with media. Media are communication vehicle. They are an opportunity, not a threat. Don't be scared to respond to them, because here's what happens when you don't respond. They will find someone else to comment, and that person might not be the right person to comment. So we need to fill that gap by being very quick with our response. Everyone who's communicating with the media needs to be speaking with the same voice. We need to be proactive, which is why we have this media database to send them press releases. So when something does happen, God forbid, there is another attack, someone dies, there is a holding statement, it's ready. We send it to the media and we say, we recognize that this has happened. If you are looking for information, this is where the information is. We are very happy to answer any of your questions. None of this craziness, panic, sensationalist. It's a problem. We have to deal with it. We have to be calm, considered, honest, and upfront, and we have to update them regularly. It's the same with the trade. They want the same thing. You know, when they send you an email, they want a speedy response. They want you to be proactive. They don't want you to wait until they've emailed you and said, what's this we're seeing in the Austrian newspaper about Cape Town being a Mordstadt? You need to be proactive and honest and upfront and calm and considered. But it's about being proactive and responding quickly. You can't put your head in the sand and hope that they're not going to notice. On social media, we need to have a clear voice. We need to make promises that we can keep. And I'm going to make a personal appeal to you. In the last 2 weeks, I have sourced about 60 Facebook groups and forums that are online where people are asking questions about South Africa. Not will I be safe, but I'm traveling to South Africa, or I'm considering traveling to South Africa as a solo female traveler. How do I do that? What should I be looking out for? What tips do you have? And no one in South Africa is stepping into that gap and answering her. So she is standing in the middle of the room asking for help, and not one of us are on those Facebook groups and responding. It's not supposedly our job, but in the absence of there being someone to do it, there is no reason why we as a tourism industry can't each take one of those groups, spend 10 minutes a day looking if someone has asked a question about South Africa and responding to them proactively and responsibly. So I will be so grateful if you put your hand up and you say, I'm willing to spend 10 minutes a day to look at one forum or to look at one Facebook group and respond to any questions that come out on those Facebook groups or on those forums about tourism. It's 10 minutes, guys. You might not even have to respond. There might be no question about South Africa that day. But the fact that someone from South Africa has gone onto that Facebook group and said, I'm here, I'm in South Africa, I work in the tourism industry, and I want to make sure that you have the best possible journey to South Africa. So what are your questions? I will help answer them. 10 minutes, that's it. Right, so then when all of this chaos is finally settled, which it will, because today's newspaper is tomorrow's bin liner, sadly, we need to restore confidence. We need to spread the word that the destination is open for business and we're ready to welcome visitors. We need your good news stories. We want you to tell us the good stuff that has been happening, that you've been doing, that you've been seeing in the destination. All your good news stories. We might not use all your good news stories, but we need 10 good news stories for one bad news story. So we need you to send us those good news stories. Maybe you've won an award. Perhaps you're doing something exceptional in the community. Maybe you got an amazing testimonial from a customer who came and visited. anything that's good news, please send it to us, info@traveltosouthafrica.org or communications@satsa.co.za. We need the good news to outweigh the bad news, and we need to start pushing that news out now. So misinformation and rumor are natural products of confusion. They are what come into the gap when you don't fill the gap. And too much information is always better than too little. I always say, if you're going into an interview with media and it's a very complicated topic, be so prepared with statistics and information, because it will literally drown out any other messaging if you have all your facts on hand. A coordinated response, uniting together, we can push the right messaging out so that we can reframe the perception of observers and potential visitors. We're not saying there isn't a problem, but what we are saying, we recognize that there is a problem. We are committed to fixing the problem within our own ambit, whatever we can do. And this is how we want to make sure you have the most exceptional visit to South Africa. So we have to reestablish the industry's credibility. We have to check what all the facts are and what the sensitivities are. We have to gauge the perception, the tone of the media coverage, which we've been doing. And there are those 120 articles that are negative articles at the moment and nothing positive, which we need to generate. We have to define what those key messages are, and we have to address those negatives head on. And then we have to prepare as an industry for a recovery phase. So what have we done? And some of you will have seen the very extensive communication that we sent out last week via David's email. We've started ascertaining what people are searching for when they search online about South Africa. So what are those long tail keywords that people will put into Google to find information about South Africa? Because what's happening at the moment is, if you type in travel to South Africa, travel safely to South Africa, the first 2 search engine result pages are full of really bad stuff. So we have, again, not stepped into the gap and made sure proactively that if you are searching for something around South Africa, that you're going to get information that is meaningful and responsible. So we have to develop content as an industry, not just as SATSA, which uses the right keywords, that if someone's searching for that specific thing, up comes one of our landing pages giving the right information. We had to determine who the media and the influencers were who were talking about South Africa, which we've done. We had to identify who the stakeholders were who needed to come together. So Westgrow, help us. Tourism Business Council, help us. SA Tourism, help us. How can we come together and work together? We needed to ascertain what we needed to communicate. And to that end, those of you who responded to the survey, gave us the questions that you are getting from your customers. We had over 600 questions that we had to wade through. We have now clustered them, and we have minimized them to only 50 questions that need to be answered. So we are developing an FAQ that will respond to those 50 questions that you have identified that your customers are asking you, and we will distribute those answers to you for you to communicate via email, newsletter, or if someone sends you an email, press releases, on your social media. If you have space on your website, or you have a landing page, you want to communicate it, by all means, that information is going to be your information. We are going to create this content for you so that you can literally just copy and paste it. We have bought 10 domains where we are going to build one domain or one website which these domains will redirect to, with information that will provide proactive safety tips for travelers who are coming to the country, as well as positive news stories. We are asking tour operators and stakeholders who have a high page ranking on Google to put their hand up and say, yes, we will host information. You already have a high page ranking on Google. I have to start from scratch with a new website. So if you are willing to come to the party and have information that's useful and proactive and responsible for customers, I'm happy to give you that information. Again, the good news has to outweigh the bad news. And then coming together as an industry. So we are sending you a weekly mailer with proactive messaging and good news. Send all your news, all your media inquiries to info@traveltosouthafrica.org, info@traveltosouthafrica.org, or communications@satsa.co.za. You're all sitting in this webinar now for training. If you need more training, if you need more advice, email info@traveltosouthafrica.org or communications@satsa.co.za so we can help you. If you need training for your social media team, if you need training for your PR team, let us know. We want to centralize the communications to one stakeholder so that we are dealing with media queries responsibly. And then, most importantly, what we didn't have and what we need is a crisis communication protocol plan, so that if Ebola raises its head, or if we have a drought, or if there is some service delivery protest which gets out of hand and tourists are affected, one simply presses the green button and everyone in the channel knows what to do, by when, how to do it. Not just the what, but the how. We are exceptional at coming up with great plans and strategies. We have a masterful one that's coming out in September that has been driven by a range of associations and the National Department of Tourism. And it is all about the what we are going to do, and not about the how we're going to do it. Every single person listening on this webinar can do something to take this forward. So what we need you to do is to add yourself to our database of stakeholders to whom we are sending proactive comms. And again, the email is info@traveltosouthafrica.org. We need you to distribute the proactive communications we are sending out through SATS's social media, newsletters, and other platforms to your own platform. So if you see a positive post on SATS's social media, or a positive post on the traveltosouthafrica.org Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, share it. Please share it so that we can amplify the message. Send us the details of any journalists or influencers that you have hosted in the past 12 months who could potentially be writing or be interested in writing about South Africa, so that we can communicate with them proactively. And again, your good news stories, send them to us. You are doing great work and you are not telling anyone about it. Don't be afraid to send it. The worst that can happen is that I will say, sorry, we can't use this today, or we can't use it this week. Please just send it to us, info@traveltosouthafrica.org. And if you do have a high page ranking with Google and your customer base is B2C, not B2B, and you are willing to give us a landing page on your website so that we can give you FAQs, please put your hand up so that we can send this to you. 10 minutes for tourism. Put your hand up and monitor a Facebook group or forum if somebody's asking about South Africa. Publish your good news South Africa stories on your own platforms. Toot your own horn. Tag us at SATSA Official and at Travel to South Africa so we can share it. Direct any media inquiries you get about safety in South Africa to info@traveltosouthafrica.org so that this can be responded to with the same messaging. Send any reports of service delivery protests to Virginia at reception@satsa.coza. We have a SATSA app. If you have not downloaded this app already, you have been living under a rock. So please download the SATSA app. It has protest alerts that go out, security alerts that go out. All your staff can be on the SATSA app. You will see immediately if there is a service delivery protest anywhere, and you can, again, communicate proactively to your self-drive tourists, to your staff. Guys, there's a protest here. Avoid this area. It really is that easy. So if you hear of any service delivery protests, send that to Virginia at reception@satsa.coza. And if you haven't downloaded the SATSA app, please do. And then follow our social media pages and share our posts. So with that, I'm now going to, David would like to make a point.
Thanks, Natalia. Guys, just to wrap up from my side, and it really was in response to somebody coming back to us. What we are not saying here is that the problem is not fundamentally with the sort of messaging. The problem that causes all of this is crime and the fact that it's out of control and not being managed. We unfortunately cannot control that. That is outside our control as the tourism industry and as SATSA members. We will endeavor and we will continue through the Tourism Business Council to bring a robust voice to government in terms of better policing and better ways of managing that. We are equally working through the Tourism Business Council to look at some practical ways that we can come back and provide some practical, I won't say fix all solutions, but some practical initiatives that would certainly help in that space. So there are things from a private sector point of view that we are putting in motion. But I think that what you've heard from Natalia today is a phenomenal take on what we can do with our small resources, but what we can do together to start managing the messaging that goes back specifically to the trade. So we look forward to working with you. If anybody has any questions, you clearly have, I can see the question page is quite heavily populated, but we're available, as we've always said, 24/7. You can phone me, you can phone Natalia. We are at your service in terms of trying to assist going forward. Thank you, everybody, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. So if you do want to ask a question, we have a little bit of time for that. There's a Q&A folder at the bottom of your screen. You click on the Q&A folder, type your question, and it'll come through to me and I can deal with them. So let's just go through some of them. Right, Sophie, I would like to send a newsletter to our trade partners. What happens if they haven't actually seen any negative news in the media? I don't want to prompt them to search for the negative news. Sophie, that's a really good question. And one of the points that I made earlier was that we need to be proactive and not have our head in the sand. So obviously, when you are communicating something, you must always communicate it with context. I would never send a newsletter out just saying, "Hi, Oaks, here you go. There's some negative reporting happening in Germany, just an FYI." But what I would do is I would balance that. So I would say, I'm giving you this heads up to state that it's possible that you will see some of this coverage. This is exactly what we are doing in this market to try and mitigate it. So you're balancing what they will come across, because they will come across it, with a proactive response to say, we know that this has gone out. This is what we're doing about it on the ground. We will communicate with you proactively. We're not hiding away from it. We're being open and honest, and we're being transparent. That is the best way of dealing with it. Because if you can almost think about it just logically, you know, if your child has done something and they're trying to hide it away from you, you will discover it at some time. If your child came to you and said, "Mom, this has happened, but don't worry, this is what I'm going to do about it," the response that you would give them would be a lot more positive than the trying to hide away from it. So I know it's uncomfortable, and I know we don't want our trade partners to see the stuff, but they're going to come across it. So you need to be proactive about your communication with them, and we will help you manage that. So I hope that's helped respond to your specific question, Sophie. Right. Marie, is the Ministry of Tourism engaging with SATSA in addressing this crisis?
Well, should I answer that,
yes, David,
Natalia?
You answer that.
The short answer is no. We haven't had a meeting with the Ministry of Tourism on this topic or on any other topic related to tourism. We will continue to try and endeavour to meet with them and to try and share what we're doing. We had a meeting scheduled on Monday with South African Tourism, and at the last minute they cancelled that meeting. So we, as I've said, we are doing what we can do as the private sector, and we will continue to try and engage the public sector, particularly nationally. As Natalia mentioned, we've had a really good working relationship with Wesgro. So the whole situation in the Western Cape is being better managed. But we do need to engage them, because the solutions that the public sector are coming up with are well-meaning, but they are, to my mind, all knee-jerk reactions. What we need to do is to root our responses in a systematic, data-driven process, and that's what we hope we've shared with you today. So, Marie, we will continue, as we always do, to try and engage the public sector.
Thanks, David. Marilda, this is a really great question. Is there a WhatsApp number for reporting protests, etc., while on the road? And actually, there isn't. There's an email address that goes through to Virginia, reception@satsa.co.za. But I do think that there is merit in putting together a WhatsApp number where you can report protests. So I will have a discussion with David and Hanley about that, and let's see what we can do with regards to putting that in place, because I recognize that might be simpler. Right, is Cape Town Tourism involved in your initiatives around crime? So the Wesgro initiative has been very wide-reaching, and that's actually why I love this initiative so much, is that everybody came together to send the survey out. Everybody approved those FAQs. It went out widely, and my understanding is that Cape Town Tourism was involved in that exercise, or at least they were approached to be part of that exercise. Westgrow, as I say, is working with us quite closely and with other associations in the Western Cape, including FIDHASA and Cape Town Tourism, to get the right messaging out. Okay. Natalia, I'm happy to respond to one of those Facebook groups. Sandy, you're an absolute gem. Thank you so much. And it won't even be 10 minutes of your day. So what I will do is, to the entire database of people who have signed up to help or to get communications out proactively. So if you've signed up either through the survey that we ran, or you've signed up subsequently after the mailer, or if you want to sign up now, info@traveltoSouthAfrica.org, I will post a spreadsheet of Facebook groups and forums where people are asking questions. And if you can then just assign yourself to one of those groups, I will then take it that you are monitoring that group, and also happy to help you with any responses if something complicated comes up. So Rob, I hope that that also answers your question about the groups that you should be watching. There are about 50, not 10, so we have our work cut out for us. In terms of driving the good news stories and countering domestic negativity drivers, is it possible to enlist the support and collaboration of Lead SA? It is possible to enlist the support and collaboration of anyone, as long as we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. But to David's point of controlling what we can control, right now, I think all we can control from a SATSA Secretariat perspective is getting our members to sing with one voice. And that essentially has to be our focus right now. We, of course, are dealing with the other associations as well as the DMOs to try and sing with the same voice. Lead South Africa is definitely an option, but it's probably not an option that I would look at right now, because, as I say, we're in crisis mode and we actually just need to get the messaging out.
Sorry, if I could just come in there as well on the notion of good news stories. This and indeed this whole response was quite firmly rooted in the SATSA conference, and we had a session on sustainability at the end, and one of the really good guys in the industry, Michael Lutzaier from Grootbos, was on the stage, and he's just done amazing stuff in and around his property in Gansbaai, involving the community, uplifting the community, using sport. I mean, it's a great role model, and his message to all of us was, we don't tell our stories well enough and strongly enough, and it's that type of good news story that we need to be able to document and to pull into a central sort of database as SATSA, because not only are we able to take case studies from there and spread them internationally and counter the bad news stories, it's also particularly relevant in terms of our ongoing discussions with government about the way the tourism sector is perceived in South Africa. And we need to debunk the myth that we are a bunch essentially of avarice white people engaged in tourism, that there is a lot of really good work being done, that the outreach and the community support that is generated through the tourism industry, and almost all companies have these good news stories. Guys, we really need to start documenting these, and we need you to send them through to us. And we don't need theses, just a 1 or 2 pager that summarizes what you're doing. If you have more information, we happily will receive it. But let's start pooling the great news and the great stuff we do, and let's start spreading that message both here in South Africa as well as internationally.
Thanks. And as I said earlier, the worst that can happen is saying, oh, sorry, we can't use this right now, or perhaps it's not relevant. So just take a chance, send it through, pictures, videos, whatever. info@traveltosouthafrica.org. Will this webinar be available afterwards for other people to view and listen to? Absolutely. We are also running webinars next week, Wednesday at 12 o'clock, and the following Wednesday at 12 o'clock. But yes, this webinar will be available. It has been recorded. and you are welcome to distribute it to whomever you wish within your company. And if there are any additional questions, I'm also very happy to answer those. You can send those through to communications@satsa.coza. We will send a newsletter out to everyone who has registered for this particular webinar, and it will have the video as well as the audio and the PowerPoint presentation. So you will have it in different mechanisms, and you can send it out in whichever mechanism is most suitable for you. I think with that, oh, hang on, we still have some stuff coming in. Chat, great webinar. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for all of you guys who've logged on and are willing to help with the cause and the 10 minutes. I really, really appreciate it. We can all be foot soldiers, and we can all do something about this. So we don't have to wait for government to write a press release full of spelling mistakes. We can do this stuff ourselves. Thanks. And on that note, I'm going to end the webinar. Any questions, please feel free to let us know. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you on another webinar soon. Goodbye.